Welcome back to another edition of Life Between Coasts. I'm your host, Leah. We're glad you're here. So, today I'd like to talk about relationships that I've had throughout my life and how they've impacted me throughout my journey thus far. These are relationships that at first were necessary, of course, because they were my parents. So, my mom gave birth to me. They raised me 0 to 18. And after 18, I was off on my own, making my own choices. Obviously, in some previous episode, we understand that sometimes those choices aren't the best or the right ones, but there are consequences in every choice that we make, so good or bad. The relationship that I had with my mother was amazing. She was my secret keeper. I could tell her absolutely anything, everything how I felt, how I saw the world, how I interacted with people, with childhood peers, and with schoolmates, really. I was the kid that didn't go on recess. I didn't like it. I would stay in the classroom and decorate the board for the teacher, or I would go to the library and see if there was anything that I could do, shelf books, or look at their computer systems and just play with games and things. I wasn't necessarily one that was seeking out the friendships, as I stated before. I don't bring friends to the table, but that's because I'm okay to be with myself. My mom taught me that. She told me that it was okay that I didn't always have to be with somebody. She told me that it was okay to stand on my own 2 feet. And she told me it was okay because I needed to make decisions for myself and I didn't need to be part of, let's say, a flock. I needed to be a leader and not a follower. And she instilled all of that into me in that 0 to 18. And so during that period of time, anytime I had a struggle, there were times I would go home from school and just upset because of how students are to each other, how mean kids can be sometimes. And she would explain to me that sometimes, Leah, it was not necessarily that they were angry with me or they didn't like me, but sometimes they were envious of me because maybe I did something that they didn't feel that they could do. Maybe they recognized something in their self that they saw as a weakness, but maybe I had as a strength. And so there could be some jealousy there. And so she taught me how to be strong, how to be okay with constructive criticism, how to be okay with myself and be settled in my own skin. So that relationship right there, that is a very, very important relationship that I had. Unfortunately, because she died when I was 25, that's when the relationship stopped. And I still have a relationship with her today. As you see on my table here, I actually have many of pictures of my family. Most everybody that's shown here in photograph are not with us anymore. But they all had a very great impact on my life. Now, after my mom died, that 0 to 18, I was very, very close with my dad, just the same, but in a different way. I was, after David died, both the boy and the girl. So I would go on snowmobiling trips with my dad. I would play pool with my dad. I'd hang out and go boating with my dad. He took me to a couple different PGA tournaments here in Michigan. He taught me how to golf. I'm not a very good golfer, and I'm not a very good pool player either. I'm going to sidebar on both of those. If you haven't already been able to tell, I can't keep my mouth shut long enough to keep my eye on the ball. And both of those things are very, very necessary in both golf and pool. But at any rate, so when my mom died, that's when my relationship with my dad changed again. As you know, I did become a parent to him, and he was basically my adult child. But at the same time, my communication with him was different. I talked to him every day instead of my mom. And those conversations really just started about just how are you today? How was your day? What did you do today? And then sometimes they got a little bit deeper, but usually I was just calling him to ask for assistance on building something. That was the only thing I could really call him, was for his knowledge and his brain. He couldn't help me financially. He wasn't able to help me emotionally, but he was able to help me in the constructive way. He was a builder his entire life, so he taught me how to be a builder. He taught me about electricity or electrical work. He taught me about plumbing. He taught me how to be self sufficient, how not to have to call somebody to fix something. 2 years ago, I changed out the gas valve on my furnace at home because I was capable of doing that. Um, I'm not a mechanical contractor, but by any means, but the components of a furnace are 6 major components, and so I was capable of doing that, and be have it completed in a successful way where my furnace still works, even to this day. They're just older, and they do need to be replaced. But at that moment, I wasn't ready to call in and have that replaced. And in fact, I'll probably replace my own. I probably will just have a friend of mine order it, and I'll get it all fitted, and then have somebody come back in and finish the last bits that are the necessity for the licensing side, just to make sure that it is done 100% appropriate. But the fact of the matter is that I can fix those things. I fix my washing machine. I fix my dryer. I turn apart lawnmowers. I've other handheld tools, and I've been able to successfully fix those because of what I learned from my dad. We always joke that he was the master or jack of all trades, master of many, because he was a walking encyclopedia, whether it be automotive repair, actual construction, building, and sometimes even just common sense with life. One of the things that he had instilled in me, and unfortunately in the last couple of years I've fallen away from, but was always leave yourself enough time to change a flat tire. Now, back then in the 1960s or 70s, you could take a flat tire off in probably less than 5 minutes. You could jack it up, remove the lug nuts, take the tire off, and probably have a spare on there in a very short period of time. But it's just that common courtesy of being on time. So that 20 minutes extra that you give yourself, if you happen to run into traffic, even though you might not have to change a flat tire, but if you get caught up because there was some sort of disturbance on the freeway or some construction that we faced, even if you show up 5 minutes early, you're still 5 minutes early because you gave yourself that 20-minute window for leaving yourself just enough time to change that flat tire. Those are lessons that he learned from his dad, and that he wanted to make sure that I knew as well. Like I said, in the last couple of years, I've definitely gotten off of that. Some of it was because of everything that I had been going through with the illness, but my goal or my intention now is to get back on target where I'm very prompt and timely and serve my clients to the best of my ability without causing any delay because of something that I've done or didn't do. Leave the house on time. That's usually the worst. So moving on from my parents, they instilled so much in how I deal with people. Treat people how you want to be treated. Kindness always kills. If somebody's mean to you, smile and say, I'm sorry, have a nice day. You don't need to be mean back. You don't need to do an eye for an eye. Sometimes there are ways, in life, or the universe has ways, especially with karma, and getting back at that person on your behalf. You don't necessarily have to do that. But if somebody lives a life with poor choices, let's say, eventually those poor choices are going to catch up with them. And I say that from the universe side, not any other side, not physical, but falling upon hard times. Things aren't going to be aligned in their life. So therefore, they're going to continuously struggle. So the idea is that building these relationships, you have people that you can fall back on, that you have people that you can turn to. Even though there's times that, like I said in the last episode, I wasn't able to ask for help, I knew that there was somebody there that would be willing to help me. Even if it's a perfect stranger, sometimes just walking into a place and asking, can you help me with this, might lead to a whole different road that you never expected. Sometimes contact with that one person can change the trajectory of your path. And so you just have to be constantly on the outlook. You don't burn a bridge, Be kind to somebody, tell them thank you, and see where a mutual advantageous relationship can lead you. Again, moving on from my parents, I didn't really have romantic relationships in my teenage years. I didn't have friends in high school. I worked on the drama set for the musical, for the spring musical, and for the fall shows that we had as well. I didn't go to high school parties. I didn't really experience what people, I suppose, would think what high school was supposed to be. Um, the people that I did surround myself with were adults, again, my teachers, other individuals that volunteered their time to come into the school to help us build the sets, to paint the backdrops, to get things ready. I handled the lighting for the film, or not for the film. I'm sorry, for the stage. Of course, we had a very old high school that was built in the 1950s, and during that period. We had what it was called a cafetorium. So it was the lunchroom during the day, and it had a stage and was the auditorium when we hosted the shows that we did. We did Music Man. We did so many. There's just so many fun things to do. But again, I wasn't part of the actors, and I wasn't part of my peer group because I still at that point didn't feel like I felt it or I fit in. Um, I did take a lot from that because I did those interactions because of course you're going to deal with people that are stars, and you're going to people deal with people that have a lot of talent, and some beautiful things can come from that, but it's all again in how you react and how you deal with those people. So there were a couple times that I do remember that I was a bit irritated with some of my peers just for their showmanship, and I didn't mean to come across as a stick in the mud, let's call it. But unfortunately, that is one thing that sits with me. These two were just the playful guys. I'd known one ever since I was a small child, probably 4 or 5 years old. The other was a friend of his, and they were the group of guys that showed up at all the football games and the basketball games, and they were the wacky ones of our class. And instead of joining in on the fun, I was the one that kind of tamped it down a little bit. And that has stuck with me ever since high school because I was like, why couldn't I have fun or be less serious in that moment? And I don't know the answer to that. And I still haven't figured out the answer to that because that's what's part of me. I think I have an old soul, and that is probably why I don't feel the connection with my peer group. So that has a lot to do with the relationships that I've formed going forward. After I moved back to Ann Arbor, or to Ann Arbor for the first time, I should say, after my incident and why I needed to leave the other town that I was in, I told you in the last episode that instead of learning to play, I got a job, an apartment, and started a relationship. I totally avoided the doctor's orders. And I don't know if it was that I was mixed up or if there was I don't even have a word for it because I don't even know how to describe it. When I first went to school in the fall of 1997, I again, didn't have relationships in high school. I had some friends, maybe. Those friends pretty much disintegrated by the time that high school, those friendships, I should say, disintegrated by the time I left high school. I only have the one person that I still speak to from my graduating class, and she's the one that I would say I'm absolutely closest to because I can call her up. I haven't spoken to her since my dad's wake. I physically saw her. So we're talking December of 2023 at this point. I texted her happy birthday. I think I texted her Merry Christmas. And that's the extent of our communication usually on an annual basis. I did text her and say, hey, here's my new venture. And she offered to be a guest. So maybe we'll bring her on so you can actually meet my one and only friend in this world. But other than that one friend, like I said, any other peer group that I associated with in high school primarily disintegrated after I left high school. So I went to college my first year. Again, I'm have the blues because I'm away from home for the first time. I have a new peer group that I'm starting to associate with. I've met some people through the different classes. I met one group through a geology class, and one of the persons out of that geology class introduced me to some other people. Some of them were basketball players, some of them were just academics. So I learned a lot from a different background, a different group of people. And whoa, was I really, really naive. I grew up in a very, very small town at that time. And so by the time I made it to college, I was not exposed to much of anything. And that wasn't shocking to me. And it didn't make me any less of a person. Um, but my eyes were definitely opened up. So I wasn't seeking a relationship, but a relationship did find me. I started a relationship, and at that point, it's a different relationship. It was an alternative lifestyle. In 1997, what we know today as somebody that's in the LGBTQ lifestyle, um, it was completely different. I didn't start necessarily, but I um, began a relationship with a woman during my first year of college. And that is what caused me to not go back to that school the following year and to actually change universities. So, as they say, you follow somebody. So, I followed somebody, but it wasn't the person to follow. Um, it was a different situation, it was a different time frame. And during that period, you didn't experience PDAs. You didn't scream from the rooftops that you were in a relationship with somebody. Um, those conversations were held behind closed doors. They weren't anything that you would share at that point. There was no social media to share to, but you wouldn't scream out, "This is who I'm with," because it wasn't 100% socially acceptable, even in 1997. So if you think in 25-year periods, from the 1970s, where you hear about all of the strife that people that are in alternative lifestyles or relationships had been in, and how all of the troubles and things that were caused not to by them but caused to them just because of the person that they chose to love. Fast forward, now you're at the end of the 90s, and it was still maybe much more accepted or acceptable, but not necessarily fully embraced by the open society. And so you have to understand that when you're coming out or you're telling your family, "Hey, I have a girlfriend," then it might not be accepted right away. My mom wasn't necessarily open to it, but she said, "You'll find your own path." My dad probably had some choice words that were never repeated to me, and he went to his grave with those words. So when I left that town and I moved to Ann Arbor, and the doctor said to learn to play, and like I said, I found a job, I got an apartment, and I found a relationship. My second relationship was again with a woman. We were together roughly 5 years. We lived together. We went out. Our life was normal. It was just the two of us. Of course, she had her friend group, and I became part of that friend group as well. Interestingly enough, there were only a couple bars in Ann Arbor that you could go to and feel comfortable as a couple. And then there were only a couple bars in the Detroit area that you could go and feel comfortable. Again, there were not places that you could go and be and offer public display of attention to or affection to the person that you're in love with or that you're happy with, that you're in a relationship with. And these are people, her friend group, I mean, these are people with high managerial skills and are entrepreneurs and were exciting and very smart-minded people to be around. But they couldn't display their life how they wanted to. So we were together, like I said, for about 5 years, and unfortunately, things fell apart for us. Um, I think it was just a growth. I think all of my relationships that I have ever had, the reason why they ended were because of growth. I was trying to grow. I wanted to be bigger. I wanted more out of life. I was not happy with being stagnant. I could not be okay with just one thing. I needed to continue my path, continue my journey because I was hungry for life. So when somebody sits and talks about something but doesn't offer any action, I have a real problem with that. I'm an action-oriented person. If I don't have the opportunity to move ahead and I feel that I'm stagnant, personally, I get a little frustrated with that. And then I get a little angry. And I need to get out of that situation. What happened with that relationship? It didn't end, again, horrible. Um, it might take a little bit for people to get over the end of a relationship. But she seems to be thriving in her world. She's had other relationships. She, has moved on with life, and I actually still see her once a year because I still do her taxes. So that shows right there that just because you end a relationship doesn't mean it has to be the end of the relationship, that you can still have some sort of extension of a friendship, even outside of a love affair. Shortly after that relationship, I started dating another person. This time, I was back into the world or the heterosexual side. I started dating a guy. He had a passion for life in a different way. Um, he was. I hate to call him. There's not really a good word to call him because he wasn't really a rebound. But he was a transition in my life. So from one side of relationships to another side of a relationship. And I don't necessarily know what to call it because I wouldn't say that I'm a lesbian or I'm bisexual, I'm heterosexual. I am who I am. It just so happens that the transition from the previous relationship went to the next one. And this is the person that I found myself in love with. He was a good guy. Side note, he was 5 inches shorter than I was. A little bit of a rebel. He had a tattoo from the nape of his neck down his entire back of a dragon that he got while he was in the military service. And he had both nipples pierced. Kind of what would you say, a complete opposite of what I would have ever expected myself to be in. Any relationship that matters. He was a good guy. He had a great heart, always helpful, but he had his own troubles too. I live by a certain standard in life, and this has been well documented in many, many books. People say you're the sum of the 5 people you associate with most. Or you're the average, the sum. Basically, what that means is if you're around 5 people, and if they're all entrepreneurs and businessmen or women and building themselves up and seeking new ideas to build wealth or to get the leading edge in a certain industry, you're going to have that passion and that drive, and you're going to want to participate in that same. if you're around those same 5 people that might be involved in something that's negatively impacting their life, let's say it's drugs or alcohol, then you're going to get tied into that. Even if you're not into drugs or not into alcohol or a heavy drinker, you're going to get pulled into that at some point in your life. If those are the people that you're associating with, some way, somehow, you're just going to say, well, hey, they're doing it. I might as well too. So you jump in, and next thing you know, you're the same as your 5 closest friends. The problem with him is that he liked to drink. I'm not much of a drinker now, but I did start. And there were nights, at least every Friday night, that I'd get drunk. He got drunk a lot more, mostly every night during the week. That bothered me. And that was the one thing that bothered me the most out of that relationship, was that he drank so much, and all he would do was talk about how he was being screwed by the man, or he could do better, and he just needed to do this. But he just would drink and bitch, pardon for the French there, and complain about his life, his moment, where he was, what his lot was. And it was everyone else's fault but his own. And I don't like that. I couldn't stand by that. He proposed to me at one point. I did accept the ring, but I did also break off the engagement. I was hungry. I did not want to leave or be stagnant, not leave, but I didn't want to be stagnant. I didn't want to be stuck. I felt that there was more for me and that I needed to move on. That's where that trip to, or the fast track MBA that I was supposed to do in Switzerland, that's where I was going to run to. I just finished my degree. I was ready for the next step, and that's where I was going to run to. I was actually using that as part of the breakup. I was using that as my escape. As we all know, I didn't make it there. But that's okay, because the universe had other plans for me. So we were together for roughly about 3 years. We lived together for a little over a year afterwards. We owned a house together. We were both paying for half, and neither one of us really had any other place to go at that moment. And so for about a year and a half, I continued to pay my half of the mortgage and keep up my end of the bargain until I met my mister, who I'm with now. That was an interesting start to our relationship. Like I said, I met him the old-fashioned way, through friends at a bar. Except for I met him just as I was ending the relationship with the other. And I didn't want those two relationships to overlap. I needed a buffer zone. I didn't want to rebound. I didn't want a short-term dating. I didn't want a friend with benefits. I wasn't ready to go into another relationship. So when I first met my mister, I didn't give him my phone number. Our mutual friend, who I'll explain more about him in another episode, he is an entrepreneur, and I ended up doing some work for him that summer. And every chance that he had to bring my mister into my orbit, let's call it, he would call him. Hey, Leah's going to be there. Hey, we're having a graduation party at the house. Leah's going to be there. He did everything in his power to make sure he brought us together. He was a matchmaker, is a matchmaker, but we're the longest term ones that he's ever had. Our relationship has had ups and downs. Almost 17 years into it, we have gone through a lot. Initially, it was just the bumps of starting a new relationship. He had hadn't really been in a long-term relationship in a while, but he was ready. He knew he was ready. I wasn't sure about navigating a new relationship, so it was touch and go at first. Within the first couple years, his mother's health started to fail, so she did live with us briefly. I started helping with her at home, and then after she had to go to a nursing home briefly, the only option was either to stay in a nursing home or to live with family. And she didn't want to go to a nursing home, so we opened our door to her. That was a fun time. It was a lot of work, but I learned so much by picking her brain. So the initial part of our relationship had a lot to do with his mother. She was great. At 92, when she passed, she had seen so much in her life. I had conversations with her where she walked to school and her brothers would walk ahead of her, and the person that was walking with her brother was an engineer or navigator that ended up on the Enola Gay, which of course was one of the planes that dropped a bomb on Nagasaki or Hiroshima. And she also worked in the executive pool at Ford Motor Company. And she'd met Henry Ford. Her brothers had delivered groceries and were caddies at Fairlane. They are stories that you just can't live without. I mean, she was born in 1923. She had lived through the Depression. She saw fireside chats first on the radio and then on TV with FDR. She saw the television from black and white to color, from cable to cell phones to computers. I mean, think of just all of those changes in life that she saw and all of those challenges. I have the benefit of being born when I was born because I was able to see the, again, pre-Google and post-Google. So leading up to 1997, before Google was founded, and then after Google, and how the search engine and how things have changed in our world because of the information access that we have. They didn't have that then. But she was able to just tell me her stories and to tell me all of the struggles that she went through. She was diagnosed with polio. Her father, instead of letting her just lie around and not get well, when the doctor said, you know, she may not walk again, forced her to walk the Detroit city blocks round and round to make sure that she was constantly in motion so she never lost her ability to walk. She also ended up having 5 kids. She was president of the parish council for the school that for the church and the school that she headed up, where all of her children went. And she was double promoted twice during school and graduated high school at 16. She had an amazing brain. And so I cherished the time that she was with us because I was able to learn so much through her eyes and her perspective. So she started our relationship. She helped us to have the foundation. When I said to her, why did you have another child, that is, after the last one? There's 7 years between my mister and then the next youngest. And she shrugged her shoulders and said, Joe wanted another. And I thought, how sweet. At least I have my mister from that. So now going back to him, I'm not disclosing too much about him specifically because he's a good guy, but also because he can be misconstrued on multiple levels. He's a complicated guy. He's passionate. He's loving. He's caring. He's kind. He's generous. But a lot of people don't see him that way. He's also very frustrating, very conflicting, likes conflict, likes to argue. but he is also the most by the book person that I know. And if there were three of us sitting here in this room and one person talking, he would be the one person that would be receiving the fire of that person. He draws that attention automatically, and that's why he's not allowed on this show. Perhaps he'll be able to start his own. He's ambitious, he's a strong rock, and he's driven. He has a fire that burns inside of him and a heart that even at the weakest time, he would give you the shirt off of his back. Like I said, he chased me for about a year. I didn't give him my phone number. He did figure out where I worked and called me a few times there, but I wasn't ready even to take his phone calls, so I had somebody block him constantly. And then one night, we were all out, and we decided to go do karaoke at a local bowling alley. We'd been there before, and I arrived. I pulled into the back parking lot, and I didn't see any vehicles that I recognized anywhere, so I texted him. I forgot to block my number that day. We went in, everybody had fun, we sang our karaoke, had cheap beer, and everyone departed at that moment. He waited the obligatory 2-day window and then texted me. Hey, cutie, how's it going? So cheesy if you think about it. Still makes me smile to this day. He said, keep Thursday open. He was not going to give me the option not to go out with him that night. So I did. I left Thursday open. He was 20 minutes late, but we still went out. We had some good conversation. And for all of the judgment and all of the initial reaction that I would have had, seeing him in, let's say, the playground, which would be an adult playground of a bar, you would look at him and say, oh, he's a player. He's a ladies' man. So that Thursday night, I was able to open the book and read the first chapter as to who this person really was. And I'm glad I did. Because nearly 17 years later, he's my rock. He is the person that I turn to. And I will continue to turn to. And let's go back to a few choices that were made during this relationship. Like I said, we all make choices, good or bad. And every choice that we make has a consequence. So the first choice wasn't my choice necessarily, other than the fact that I didn't go to Switzerland, even though I wanted to, even though I needed to run there. That's where I wanted to be. That's where I was trying to escape to, was to change my life. I went on the first date. It was the middle of August. By the middle of September, I was in the emergency room at a local hospital in dire pain. On a pain scale from 0 to 10, at the worst, it was a 15. I didn't know what was going on. All I know is I was laying in a gurney in a hallway, just staring at the ceiling in massive pain, and nobody was doing anything because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I must have a magnet attraction to bad doctors. I don't know. But I promise you, these are the last 2 episodes of medicine I'm going to tell you about because I'm tired of it. So the first one, like I said, I didn't have a choice because it just happened. But I'm thankful that I was here when it happened. I had what they called ovarian torsion. So the best way to describe it is my ovary, my right ovary specifically, had a cyst. But it wasn't a typical ovarian cyst. It was a cyst that was hanging off the side of it. So it was about the size of a orange, I believe is what they said. So for just description purposes. So what happened was this orange grew so heavy that it collapsed my ovary inside my body. But as it collapsed the ovary, it twisted it and it cut the blood supply off to that ovary. So my ovary is dying inside me and I'm laying on a gurney in pain. They're not quite sure what it is. They weren't sure if it was a ectopic pregnancy. They weren't sure if there was some other issue, if there was a tumor or what have you, but they weren't sure exactly what was going on. Ultimately, it came down to emergency surgery. So after 15 hours of laying on a gurney, 12 of which were in the hallway, probably thinking that I was just some kid complaining and trying to get drugs. I don't know. I was 29. I wasn't some young kid trying to get drugs. I was in massive pain. So they took me to emergency surgery. I'd never been through surgery before. I was scared. And so they took the right ovary out along with the cyst and left me with a hideous scar. I say hideous because 3 days later, after I was out of the hospital, I was back in the clinic because apparently I'd had some sort of infection. And they had to open up my wound. And unfortunately, while they opened my wound, I was in the clinic. They didn't give me any numbing. There was nothing that they gave me. All they could offer me was some ibuprofen. Now, mind you, my incision was spasming. It was hurting. I was in massive pain. I'm in a clinic, and now they're opening up a wound without any type of anesthesia, any type of topical. And now, mind you, we're talking this is, a 6-inch open scar or wound that they're taking the sutures out and opening. And then they tell me that, oh, just pack it. Let it heal from the inside out, and that's how we're going to have you heal this. And you'll heal within 4 to 6 weeks. About 3 months later, the wound still wasn't healed. And then they said, don't do anything, just let it heal. That's how I ended up with such a hideous scar. I've never been back to that hospital ever since. And it's a major hospital in this area. That happened within the first 30 days of our relationship. So it meant that we had to learn to, or get to know each other. This was strictly the foundation of our relationship was built on conversation, ambition, what we wanted to achieve out of life, and how we were going to achieve it. The fact that I had to have an emergency surgery within the first full month of our relationship, not only one was confirmation that I was not meant to be in Switzerland, but it was also the confirmation that maybe I did just find the person I was meant to be with. Because there was no physical. You always have that in your honeymoon stages, right? It was only mental and emotional. So we have a very strong foundation. However, I did push that one to the limits. So the last thing that I'm going to say about the medical side is what happened when I was 35. I started having some problems, probably June of that year of 2015. And the problem that I was having was pain. And it was the same pain that I was feeling when I had ovarian torsion. I was sick to my stomach. I had intense pain in my gut. I didn't know what was going on. It was just another indescribable, oh my gosh, what's happening? We were supposed to have guests over for a barbecue. I canceled that and said, I just can't do it. 3 hours later, I was in the emergency room at a different hospital. After ultrasounds and then follow-up ultrasounds and further ultrasounds, uh, stemming probably over the next 3 to 5 months, we figured I still have not necessarily the same type of cyst that I had with the original issue, but I was having normal ovarian cysts, but I also had fibroids. And those fibroids are what caused me pain during normal cycles. Women could understand this far better than men, but just understand that it was very, very painful during those periods of time. What I found out after all of these ultrasounds is that the fibroid that I had was started out about the size of a walnut, and that was identified on the original from the other initial surgery, that there were other fibroids present in my uterus. This fibroid that was the size of a walnut 6 years prior was now the size of a cantaloupe. I was given a choice by my doctors. Hurry up and have a kid, put your eggs on ice, or have a hysterectomy. That was the situation I was in. I chose to have a hysterectomy. I chose to have a hysterectomy. I say that a second time because, like I said, I'm a very quick decision maker. I'm very autonomous in my decision making. I look for what's going to suit me. I'm going to make a decision for me, and I'm going to move forward for me. Me and my mister aren't married. We're in a committed relationship. But I didn't consult him. I didn't say, hey, do you think we want to have a kid? I assumed, yeah, he's 16 years older than I am. Does he really want to be grandpa at the high school football game? Or at the prom? Or the graduation? I figured we're focused on our entrepreneurship, on our building wealth. There's no time for a kid. I thought, who would want to raise a kid anyways? They would complicate things. What if that changed our relationship? I thought, what if I have a kid and he leaves me? Now I'm stuck with it. I chose to have a hysterectomy. I didn't think that it was such a big deal to him. But I'll tell you what, we had a trip. We came back in that December, just after Christmas, December 26th, I went into the hospital. I had the hysterectomy. He visited me once. Nobody else did. I got out of the hospital on January 1st, which was a weekend. And that Monday, he shoved a computer at me and said, "You're not dead. Get to work." That was the first inclination that maybe I should have involved him in that decision-making process. But he wasn't an emotional guy, I didn't think. How would that affect him? He was hard. He was Mr. Man. But obviously it did. I did get to work right away, by the way, because as an entrepreneur, we don't have sick pay. We don't have time that we can take off. If we don't work, we don't get paid. So 10 days later, I was in my tax office doing taxes because what else was I going to do? That was in 2015. Only now, and only in the last couple years, has my mister actually been able to tell me out loud that his biggest regret was the fact that we didn't have a child. It's a lot to weigh on. I always looked at it, well, my dad was adopted. If I want a child, I'll just adopt. There are plenty of kids that need a happy home to be in. I just think, honestly, deep down, that I didn't want to be a parent. I'm not certain why, because I have a large family. Well, not my family, my mom's family. She was one of 8 girls. They've all had kids. And unfortunately, at this point, even though we were a very tight-knit family, we're not as tight-knit as we once were. And in fact, I'm very much estranged from that side of the family. In fact, any parts of my family I'm very much estranged from. Because like I said, he was the only person that came to see me when I basically gave up my womanhood. I gave up my uterus. I could no longer be a mother. I still am. That's why I have fur babies. But that's the reason why I don't have children. So when people look at somebody that looks perfectly normal, that looks like that they should have kids or should have adult kids or young kids or whatever, it's not good to pass judgment. Oh, do you have kids? Or, oh, why don't you have kids? You should have kids. You don't know the person's situation necessarily to know whether to broach that or not. So I usually don't, although we do have jokes and things about it now. But I do see the emotional toll that it had taken on my mister. So after realizing the emotional toll that all of this has happened to my mister, it's made me understand that sometimes my autonomous way of being isn't the best way to be. Sometimes that certain decisions should have some groupthink about it. And with all of that in mind, I just want everyone to know that these relationships are very important to me. And like I said, I don't burn bridges. I try to leave people better off than when I found them. And there's still work that my mister and I are working on and working towards. We're getting to understand each other, even 17 years into this, still understanding each other at a deeper level. And that's what's important, is that we had that strong foundation in the beginning that we were able to overcome all of the life's trials and tribulations that were thrown at us in this first part of our life together. I'd like to thank you again for joining us today on Life Between Coasts. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you next week.